Hello, I am Peter Okwoche. Welcome to Focus on Africa. It's been 25 years since Nelson Mandela cast his vote in the first free and fair elections in the country. South Africans are once again going to the polls.
And I'm Nomsa Masego live in Johannesburg, where the governing ANC is facing a tough test this time around because of corruption scandals. The party is certainly going to win this election, but the question is, by how much?
They expect us to vote, but they won't do anything for us.
And there have been election observers here in the country, and one of those is former President of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan.
One thing that is clear is democracy is stabilizing, is gaining ground in Africa, and we encourage that.
Also on the program, a backlash in Uganda over press freedom. Uganda's government is facing scrutiny after the country's Communication Commission suspends 39 journalists over the broadcast of lawmaker Bobi Wine's arrests.
People who are regulators should be a little bit more sensitive in the management of media houses.
And in sport, like father, like son, find out why Kenyans are comparing Liverpool's Divock Origi to his father after their comeback in the Champions League. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Today's election in South Africa is the toughest test yet for the country's ruling African National Congress Party since democratic elections were introduced and apartheid brought to an end in April 1994. Support for the party is eroding, with public anger over corruption, a struggling economy and unemployment sitting at 27%. Let's go straight now to Nomsa Maseko, who is in Johannesburg. Nomsa.
Well, the wet and cold weather in many parts of the country certainly did not deter the millions of South Africans who went out to vote. And despite glitches in some parts and also in some areas where voting stations still are yet to be open, the Independent Electoral Commission says that it has been encouraged by the voter turnout. The BBC's Phumza Fihlane filed this report.
Up before sunrise, eager to cast their vote. This is South Africa's 6th democratic election and only 25 years since black people were allowed to vote. In rural Polokwane, young and old braved the cold weather. 27 million people were registered to take part in this election. There are very real and pressing needs here. Economic growth is slow, millions are without jobs, and this remains a hugely unequal society. And on the outskirts of Johannesburg, the people of this poor community are desperate for something different.
Alexandra is one of South Africa's poorest townships, and it's here that people have protested against the lack of service delivery. They've protested against corruption. They've said it's caused a delay in them getting access to proper housing. So they're coming out here today hoping that what they vote for will bring some much-deserved change here.
We just need a difference. Especially, you can see around this place that we live in. We just need a difference. So we're hoping that this time things will change.
I really want to see infrastructure and education. I'm really big about those two things. So I believe if we educate the children enough and ourselves enough, we can make a change.
But for some, even after voting previously, life has remained the same. And this time, they've decided to stay away. Gina Modibedi has 2 children, no job or access to clean water.
I am very upset. If Nelson Mandela was a candidate, I'd go running to vote without any doubt. We drink dirty water, but they drink bottled water. They live in fancy places and we live in squalor. They expect us to vote, but they won't do anything for us.
For many South Africans, the time of promises has passed. If the parties don't deliver, they risk becoming obsolete. It's a defining moment for South Africa's democracy. Phumza Fihlane, BBC News, Johannesburg.
Indeed, it is a defining moment for South Africa's democracy. 25 years into democracy, a lot of people have been sharing their memories about what 25 years of democracy means for them. The BBC's Milton Ngosi filed this report.
Here in Soweto, the voting stations open at 7 a.m. in the morning. The voting was expected to go on until 9 p.m., but the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, said that anybody inside the station after 9 p.m. will be allowed to vote. So the voting might continue well beyond that 9 p.m. cutoff time. A lot of people came here, stood in long queues, and they were telling us what they were voting for. A lot of them told us that they were voting for the future. They wanted a better South Africa, a South Africa free of corruption. They wanted President Cyril Ramaphosa to step up the fight against corruption, but also they want better schools, hospitals, roads, and many local issues. But there are those who came here to remind us about the recent past, South Africa's apartheid era. They said they came here to vote for white minority rule to be set right back in the annals of history. They are remembering a time when black people could not vote. It's only 25 years ago, by the way, so not so long for a country's history. And a lot has changed here in South Africa since that time. People have done relatively well, particularly black people. Black middle class has increased. But as they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. There's still a lot to be done here.
Well, some reflections there about South Africa's young democracy. Now, joining me to unpack some of the issues that we have been hearing people talk about is Xolani Dube, who is a political analyst. Xolani, there's been a lot of criticism, particularly for those people who chose not to vote. Do you think there's unnecessary pressure on the people who chose to abstain?
Look, I think that they are exercising their right, because to abstain also is a form of voting, is a form of showing a vote of no confidence to the current system as well as to the current government, and also to say, is it worth it to put their hope and trust to the future, whereas in the past they have been disappointed.
But what about then those people who say that political parties have failed to convince them that this time around voting was the right thing to do? Do you think that political parties could have done more to convince people to come out?
Look, I think people have seen it through that in Africa, as well as here in South Africa, politicians are just political merchants. They are not there to service them, but they are there for themselves. And hence, they decided that, look, in order to affirm these political merchants to occupy such kind of honorable position in our society, the best thing is to withdraw their vote. And moreover, bear in mind that people have been saying Cyril is the new salvation for South Africa, whereas Cyril has been with South African society and South African politics for years. And so him as well, he is a part of the rot that has been happening here in our country. But people are saying, look, is it possible if we can give him a chance? Media and other people have been pumping a narrative that Cyril is the South African Messiah. Cyril is the new Mandela in South Africa. But the history of Cyril and his political organization shows that Cyril is not different from the rest.
Well, then it remains to be seen then how the South African population is going to vote about whether or not it is going to give the governing ANC another 5 years as a mandate. Xolani, a political analyst, thank you very much for joining us here on Focus on Africa. Now, there have been election observers who have come and have observed these elections. There have been several glitches in some polling stations. Some did not open on time and some opened, and eventually the Independent Electoral Commission was able to allay fears. And one of those observers is the former president of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan. He told the BBC that he has full confidence in South Africa's electoral process.
The incident that a particular voting station was burnt, because when you consider that they have up to 22,924 voting centers, approximately 23,000, and if there's an isolated incident, and also even that case, the electoral body, the IEC, mobilized very quickly and get the people to vote in another area, and the people voted shows the response people have, and it shows how resilient the South Africans are towards maintaining and sustaining democracy in the country.
Where do you think this continent is heading in terms of the right electoral conduct?
We are very pleased that you are now talking about so many elections in Africa. Before this time, we'll be talking about how many military coup d'etats had happened in Africa. So it shows that as a continent, we are progressing. We may not be too satisfied with all the elections, but one thing that is clear is democracy is stabilizing, is gaining ground in Africa, and we encourage that.
That was former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan speaking to Focus on Africa there. Now, it's just a few hours before polling stations close, and it's supposed to be closing at 9 o'clock local time. But the last person who is on the queue will be allowed to vote even after 9 o'clock. And then counting will begin shortly afterwards. And then from there, results are going to start trickling in. But the official full results are expected to be announced on Saturday. It's back to you, Peter.
Many thanks, Nomsama Seko there in Johannesburg. And remember, viewers, you can follow all the latest on the South African elections on our website. That's at bbc.com/news. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwocha. Still to come, Mimi with the sports, as we catch up with Ajax and Cameroon goalkeeper Andre Onana ahead of today's Champions League semi-final second leg. I'm Peter Okwocha. The top story this hour. Millions of voters have been going to the polls in South Africa's general election. The ruling ANC party is facing its toughest test since 1994. Uganda's Communication Commission is being dragged to court over an alleged attempt to control the press. Over 30 journalists have been suspended for supposedly violating broadcasting standards after the live arrest of politician Bobi Wine was aired. The Ugandan Journalists Association is applying for an injunction.
People who are regulators should be a little bit more sensitive in the management of media houses. Remember that we are ruled by labor laws, we are ruled by our constitution. We can make mistakes which can cost the media house a lot of money. And not only that, it creates a bad impression for the nation. What people get outside is that Uganda is not accommodative of issues. These things happen, even in Europe, even in America. Even as media, the Uganda Journalists Association, the National Association of Broadcasters, we've got a code of conduct. And that code of conduct tells us what we can do and what we can't do. A lot of these people are very well trained. You editors are very well trained. They know their limits. And they know what is a fake news, and they know what is not good. But if by mistake something goes through, then you correct it. It happens. We are human. We're not perfect. We're not 100% perfect. We make mistakes. And therefore, I cannot tell people to stop doing their work. But I can tell them to be careful not to bring wrong information. That's all.
Well, let's speak now to Ibrahim Bosa from Uganda's Communications Commission. Ibrahim, why are you trying to suppress press freedom in your country?
Thank you very much, Peter. The Uganda Communications Commission made a directive to broadcasters in Uganda to be able to provide space for an investigation on breach of minimum broadcasting standards. And this basically has arisen because of the numerous sensitization that has gone around the country on all broadcasting houses. And unfortunately, even with repeated reminders, repeated warnings, we still have broadcasters who have failed to meet standards or are deliberately flouting standards.
Okay, Ibrahim, so let's look at, so you've given warnings in the past, but let's look at what triggered this directive. The live broadcast of the arrest of a member of parliament. Where did they go wrong with that? I mean, they were just reporting something that was actually happening.
Under the Uganda Communications Act, that is the law for the communication sector in Uganda, we have statutory requirements for minimum broadcasting standards where broadcasters are expected to take due caution and care to not air out broadcasts that are likely to incite violence, that could be prejudicial or actually could be immoral in terms of our societies.
So you believe, so the Ugandan Communications Commission believes that airing the arrest of a member of parliament could incite violence, and so they shouldn't do that. And there we go again. Back to my first question about press control.
The issues under control here are the kind of images that are being displayed, which are sensational, that are morbid, that are alarmist, that actually are not protecting our protected segments like young children. There are no warnings that are given when using this kind of footage. And the minimum broadcasting standards requires due caution, requires fairness, requires balance. And therefore, we needed to undertake an investigation on breach of this kind of standards to help us be able to educate broadcasters better and also show them how they are failing and probably be able to improve in this regard. So it is the manner in which we are portraying the situations, much as that they are political, that is alarmist in nature. They are sensational. We have messages that are anarchists, that are extreme in nature, and this is portraying the country in bad light and actually portraying the situation out of proportion.
Ibrahim, if I may put it to you, what is actually portraying the country in bad light is this directive from the NCC. If you are worried about sensationalist pictures from this arrest, maybe you should be talking to the arresting authorities and saying, listen, arrest people, but in a civilized way.
Actually, we have done our part and done better. I may not be able to comment on the engagements that are going in with the forces, but we are in discussions, and we have done so with the National Association of Broadcasters, and actually made a correction to the nature of suspension required for this investigation. The staff that were expected to be losing jobs, we have actually confirmed that nobody is losing a job. We only expect that program managers give way or step aside to allow for a transparent and fair investigation without any bias or interference.
Okay,
so we
Ibrahim,
expect to make it very quick and make it productive for everybody involved.
Okay, Ibrahim Boso from the Ugandan Broadcasting Commission, thank you. I'm sure this is a conversation that we will continue with in due course. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. The Libyan Prime Minister has been meeting with the French President in Paris amid growing tensions in the country. It comes as troops loyal to General Khalifa Haftar claim to have shot down a warplane and captured its pilot in the Al Hira region south of the capital, Tripoli. Sudan's ruling military council is insisting that Sharia remain the basis of the country's new laws as talks with the opposition remain deadlocked. The 10-member military council claimed to have reservations about the protesters' constitutional proposals, including their silence on Islamic law. And the world has had its first glimpse of the new royal baby 2 days after his birth. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex introduced their newborn son named Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor at a photo call in Windsor Castle. They described the last few days as like a dream. A national emergency has been declared in Namibia following a drought that has claimed more than 60,000 livestock. It's the second time this has happened in 3 years. The president says the country is facing disaster and has asked for international help. Maggie Forcelado from our partner broadcaster One Africa TV brings us this report.
In the latest Namibia Crop Prospects Food Security and Drought Situation Report, it states that the 2018-2019 rainfall season has been extremely poor due to low rainfall and extremely high temperatures. Provisional crop estimates indicate that all crop-producing areas are expecting massive reductions in the expected harvest, and grazing conditions continue to deteriorate in most parts of the country. According to the report, the central, southern, north central and the northwestern regions of Namibia are the most affected, with livestock mortalities reported as a result of malnutrition. A drought emergency has been declared more than once in Namibia since 2013. However, conditions improved slightly towards 2016-2017 and deteriorated in 2018. Maggie Forciedo, Windhoek, Namibia.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi?
Thank you very much, Peter. It's the unforgettable night that many are still talking about. And Divock Origi was one of the heroes on Tuesday, helping Liverpool to defeat Barcelona with his 2 goals in their 4-0 win to progress 4-3 on aggregate. He's received high praise from many Kenyans who have been celebrating him. Why? That's because he's following in the footsteps of his famous father, Mike Okoth Origi, who had a very successful career in his native Kenya before spending the majority of his playing days in Belgium, where his son was born. It was not long before social media were making comparisons. In 1997, his dad was involved in a famous 4-3 win against Burkina Faso in a famous World Cup qualifier, and Divock last night opened the scoring for Liverpool and then got the winner. Now, who will join Liverpool in the final? Well, shortly we will see Ajax in action, hosting Tottenham Hotspur in the other semi-final second leg. And one man who has really stood out is Andre Onana. The Cameroon international is one of the few black goalkeepers playing at the top of European football. Ahead of today's game, BBC's Stanley Kwenda went to meet him in Amsterdam. He spoke about the difficulties ahead of a game where he could become the first black keeper to play in a Champions League final since Brazil's Dida in 2007 for Milan.
You don't have a lot of black goalkeeper in the top, and people, they already have on their mind the black goalkeeper they are not confident, you know, they make too much mistake. But it's something we have to change. We have to try to change, because I don't see the difference between white goalkeeper and black goalkeeper. We are the same. They make mistake, I make mistake too, everyone makes mistake. So for us, like a black goalkeeper is really, we really need to prepare well, because it's not easy for us.
Do you feel sometimes that, you know, as a black goalkeeper, you have to work perhaps twice?
For sure. Everyone knows that. You know, it's not big. Everyone knows that it's not easy for us to arrive to that level, you know, especially when you are black. But for me, it really doesn't matter, you know, black or white. In the end, I'm a goalkeeper.
And Spurs will be hoping to pip Ajax to the final in Madrid. The midfielder, Kenya international Victor Wanyama, believes his side has enough fight in them to overturn a 1-0 defeat in the first leg of the Champions League semi-final. Spurs have travelled to Amsterdam for the tie, but Wanyama is confident of a positive result.
I know, you know, the first leg wasn't good result for us, but we are aware of that, and we know we're still alive, so we will go there and fight. We go there and fight, and I think if we fight as we showed in the second half, then we can get something.
That's all the sport. Peter.
What a great match last night. Let's hope we have something close to that tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mimi. Thank you. All right. Now, finally, South Africans might be voting today, but thousands of kilometers away, the country's late President Nelson Mandela hasn't been forgotten. An exhibition of his drawings and engravings, many of them signed by the man himself, have been put on show in this tiny village in Portugal. The artwork depicts the various stages that made up his life story, from the start of his activism against the apartheid regime to his imprisonment until his freedom. Now, don't forget that you can get in touch with me and some of the team. I am on Twitter. My handle is @Okwoche. But for now, that's it from Focus on Africa. From me and the rest of the team, I want to say thank you very much for watching. See you soon.